Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are now going to start our session. This is the webinar series of the Bicol University Center for Policy Studies and Development. This is our first session. We are doing this every month, different topics for you to see or to hear about the best dissertations and theses at the Bicol University Graduate School. For our first installment, our researcher highlighted today is Dr. Gina M. Oropesa. She is a graduate of PhD in Peace and Security Administration from the Bicol University Graduate School and currently the chairperson of the Peace Studies Department of Bicol University. We would like to welcome all our audience who are here right now. And we would like to remind everybody that for you to get your certificate of participation, please accomplish the evaluation, post-activity evaluation. The link will be posted in the chat box later. So ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Gina M. Oropesa.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Your audio is okay.
So first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Center for Policy Studies of Bicol University for inviting me as the first guest speaker for this webinar. Allow me to share my PowerPoint presentation. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
So good morning once again. So my dissertation is Resilience Experience of Selected Families in Marawi City in the context of peace building. I understand I have only an hour to present this study. So I hope I can cover all the 10 family cases in this research. For the background, to be able to understand this study, let us first take a look at what really happened in Marawi City. Conflicts in Mindanao, I think we're familiar with what is happening in Mindanao, but mostly the conflict in Mindanao is said to be rooted in religion. In the literature, it has been recorded that the conflict in Mindanao started as early as 1960s. So the conflict actually has existed for about 60 years now, with the Moros claiming to be claiming Mindanao as their homeland. So that's the reason why they call themselves as Bangsamoro or Bansa ng Moro, then the nation of the Muslims. So the Marawi siege is said also to be an act of terrorism in the guise of religious extremism. It started with Isnilon Hapilon bringing the conflict in Marawi City sometime in May of 2017, May 23, 2017. So why Marawi? Marawi is the Islamic city in the Philippines. The population is believed to be mostly Muslims. In fact, it's stated that 96.4% of the population in Marawi are Muslims. So Marawi is the target of Isnilon Hapilon because they wanted to establish a caliphate in the area. What is a caliphate? A caliphate is Islamic state where it will be ruled by a chief Muslim ruler, and that was what Isnilon Hapilon wanted. So Isnilon Hapilon is a pro-Islamic state of Iraq and Syria, meaning pro-ISIS faction of the Abu Sayyaf group, and is also confirmed as the leader of the ISIS in Southeast Asia. And when he launched the attack in Marawi City, he had the help of the Ma'otib group, or the Ma'otib brothers, in the names of Omar Khayyam and Abdullah, who are descendants of an influential and affluent clan of Maranao. Aside from the Abu Sayyaf group, Isnilon Hapilon also has allied groups, terrorist groups like the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters and the Ansar Khalifa Philippines. So the Battle of Marawi lasted for about 5 months, which resulted to a number of casualties, crimes, terroristic activities, and the deliberate indiscriminate killing, bombing, shooting incident, civilians, rape, molestation, and other lawless violence. So as you can see here, this is the physical geography of Marawi City. The Ma'a, which is called the most affected area in Marawi City, this consisted of about 24 barangays. And the Ma'a is just along the Lake Lanao, near to the different central business district. In fact, the most affected area is also known as the Central Business District. Ibig sabihin po, yung kung saan nangyari ang gyera ay nandoon yung mismong sentro ng commerce or yung kalakalan. And the Marawi siege resulted to evacuation of residents of, as mentioned, 24 barangays, and had about 353,921 internally displaced individuals and about 77,170 displaced families. Now, I wanted to study resiliency of the selected families in Marawi City in the context of peace building, because while I was reading the literatures, I found out that when the Marawi armed conflict happened, more of the research or researches that were done centered mostly on the stories of just members of the security forces, but less on the displaced families. And also because in Bicol region, we are familiar with natural disasters like the volcanic eruption and typhoons. But I am particularly interested in the resiliency of the people in a man-made phenomenon like a war. So I also wanted to see whether the resilience of the people is different. So specifically, to be able to understand the resilience of these families, I looked into the profile of the respondents, the demographic profile like the age, the marital status, sex, religion, educational attainment, the barangay, economic status, and the number of family members. At the beginning, I thought that the most affected areas are the CBD, the Central Business District, contains a varied population belonging to different walks of life. But eventually, when I was there, I discovered that in that particular area, most were businessmen. Okay. However, in my coverage of the 10 families, I used the non-probability sampling, but considering the different profiles of the families, like businessman, senior citizen, PWD, government employee, private employee, senior citizen, and a family with few children, family with many children, and a family that belongs to a sultanate clan. So these are the various profiles I have covered in this case study. So the second problem I looked into are the stories and experiences before, during, and after the Merawi siege along the following: profession, livelihood, family life, education, sociocultural, and health. And the third is the institutions that help in the resiliency of the people, like the local government, the national government, the law enforcement, and the people's organization or the non-government organization. And then the problems encountered along resiliency and the peace-building framework towards resiliency that can be proposed. So at the end of this study, I actually designed a resilience paradigm and at the same time, a peace-building framework towards resiliency. So because I have a limited time, only 1 hour, I will be proceeding directly to the different cases. Okay, these are 10. These are 10 cases. So the family case number 1 is the story of Hassan and his family. Before anything else, I'd like to inform you that the respondents gave me permission to make use of these photos and to publish their pictures and even their names. But for protection of their identity, I have changed the names of the respondents. So family case number 1, this is the story of Hassan and his family. I think what is amusing about the story of Hassan is that this is the only family that evacuated in the most affected area during the Marawi armed conflict, having money when they evacuated, because the rest of the families, when they left the Ma'a, they did not bring any money with them. So what happened to the story of what happened to Hassan is that Hassan is the area leader in area 4 of the village where they were evacuated, so the Sagunsungan village. So this is the transitional shelter that the national government created for the displaced families in Marawi City. So in this particular area, the area 4, Hassan became the area leader of that particular place. He is 56 years old, married, Islam in religion, and a high school graduate. But though he is a high school graduate, he owns several businesses in the Central Business District. He came from Barangay West Marinaot, Marawi City, and he belongs to the high-income family. He has 8 kids. The oldest is 32 years old, and the youngest is 13 years old. And he also has a child with special needs, which made the evacuation even more difficult during the siege because of his child with special needs. The primary businesses that he has are the following. He has computer shop, bakery, gym, sari-sari store, school supplies. And prior to the siege, his wife and children were engaged into the different family businesses, helping him manage everything. So ang nangyari, tigi-isa. Ang bawat pamilya ay tigi-isa ng negosyo, and each of the member of the family manages that business. So when the armed conflict happened on that particular day, the wife was not in the area. So the wife was in Iligan City, And so when they heard that a shooting incident was happening nearby, they thought that it would only last for a few days, and they did not think of evacuating. But after a few days, no, patuloy pa rin ang pagbabarilan, so they realized that they needed to evacuate. At that particular instance, meron silang 1,000,000. They had 1,000,000 peso cold cash in their homes. Kasi ang sinasabi ni Hassan, bagong benta niya pa lang yung isang building that he owns. So when this Marawi siege happened, meron silang pera. Gusto nilang iwanan yung pera because they were thinking na babalik lang naman sila ng ilang araw. But the eldest initiated or insisted that they should bring the money. And ito yung ginamit nila when they evacuated to Iligan City. So all family members, as I said, and all family members except the wife who was in Iligan at the time were at the area, including the 4 laborers. So in other words, when they evacuated from the area, the laborers were with them. So the gunshot started at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Barangay Bastak Malutlot, some meters away from their barangay in West Marinaot. At around 3 o'clock, the gunfires already reached their barangay, but it did not produce any fear among the family. Kasi ang sinasabi nila, nasanay na sila na ang putukan sa Marawi, parang it's a natural occurrence. So if it happens, parang it would not prompt the families there to evacuate that easily. But realizing that the gunfire is lasting for more than few days, that's the only time they realized that they needed to leave. So it took them 3 days after the start of the siege before leaving their house. And they were thinking that the skirmishes would eventually die down in the next few days. It was only when the bombs started to be dropped in their place that they decided to evacuate. So they started to pack their things and bring the bag of cash with them. So as I mentioned, ito lang yung pamilya po na nagkaroon ng pagkakataon na makadala ng pera. All the other 9 families evacuated without anything in their hands. Walang pera, walang gamit, because lahat po sila nag-iisip na hindi naman magtatagal yung putukan. So when they went to Iligan, doon po muna sila nag-evacuate. They used the money to rent. They stayed first in the hotels, for some days, and then eventually rented an apartment. One of the reasons why they transferred is because the daughters experienced discrimination. I think this is, according to them, this is one of the problems they encountered, the discrimination, because they were Maranaos, people of Marawi. The people of Iligan also tend to discriminate them, thinking that they were also terrorists. So another notable experience that they had when they evacuated is that they were able to bring with them the titles of their lands. So dala-dala po nila yung mga titulo ng kanilang mga bahay, and I think this helps them in proving their claim of the particular land after the siege, when there were nothing left in the area. Lahat ng mga buildings nasunog na. So the other families were also claiming other lands. So ang nagkakaproblema sila because nagkakaroon ng multiple claims on some other lands. So ang kagandahan sa pamilyang ito, they were able to bring their titles before they left. And they were able to prove that that the land belongs to them. Along education, bago po ang siege, the family is living an affluent lifestyle. The daughters were into private schools, and even all the children were into private schools. One daughter is a graduate of master's, and the other one is planning to enroll in a doctorate degree. But after the siege, wala na po, hindi na sila nakapagpatuloy ng kanilang pag-aaral. And the rest of the kids transferred from private school to public school. So this is basically what happened to the case of Hassan. And Hassan eventually suffered a stroke because of the stress, mental health that they experienced during the Marawi siege. So I'll be moving now to family case number 2. This is the story of Aisha and her family. Aisha and her family were also living in Barangay Daguduban, Marawi City. So nung nangyari ang incident, she was already with her parents. So bakit po si Aisha at yung kanyang anak nandoon na, umalis na sa lugar? Because according to her, few days before the shooting or the gunfire, meron na silang na-receive na text message informing them na magkakaroon ng barilan sa Marawi City. Some people would not believe this text message, no? But Aisha was convinced that this text message might be true. So ang ginawa niya, umalis na agad siya doon sa lugar nila at pumunta siya doon sa lugar ng kanyang parents kasama yung kanyang anak, no? But true enough, after a few days nangyari nga ang shooting. So when that happened, yung kanyang asawa ay naiwan sa lugar. The ICs were already in the area and nakuha po yung kanyang asawa. Because ang ginagawa po ng mga ICs, according to Aisha, is that all the male members in the area were not allowed to go. So nire-recruit na ang mga lalaking miyembro ng pamilya para maging parte ng ICs. So what the husband of Aisha did was to pretend that he is already a member of the ICs. But when he had the chance to escape, he was able to do so. So eventually, nakatakas yung asawa ni Aisha. And after a few days, they were reunited. So this is also, I think, the common stories recurring, no, in all the families. They tend to corroborate with the statements of each other that the ICs were recruiting the male residents in that particular place to be part of their group. According to Aisha, if there is a good thing that happened during the Marawi siege, is that yung bisyo ng kanyang asawa ay nawala. She identified a certain vice of her husband that, you know, minimized after the siege, because the commodity is no longer available during that time. But as to livelihood, si Aisha po ay isang vendor. Siya ay isang vendor. So if there is one family that belongs to the low income it is Aisha and her family. So isa lang siya sa kukunti sa 10 pamilya na nabibilang po sa low income. She would just sell viand, no, and some other things, no, just to be able to provide for the family. The husband of Aisha is walang trabaho, so she is the one that provides for the family. Khalida, the story of Khalida and her family. Khalida is also a businesswoman, a senior citizen. She belongs to a rich family before. She owns buildings at pinaparenta niya po ito. But eventually, when they evacuated during the crisis, wala din siyang naiwan. And now, when the national government, through the DSWD, provided them with family package in the amount of 50,000 and a livelihood package, 53,000, family package in the amount of 53,000 and a livelihood package of 20,000, a total of 73,000. Lahat yung naibigay ng DSWD sa bawat pamilya, displaced families who were transferred to the transitional shelter. So the support that they received from the national government and even in the local government were actually used to pay their debts, no? Yung mga utang nila. So kukunti na lang ang natira na naibigay sa kanila ng gobyerno. And that small amount of money left was used to start a small business. In this particular instance, Khalida started a sari-sari store in the Sagunsungan shelter, but all the members of the family is with her, no? A total of 15 members. And I think this is also important to note that in the Maranao families, hindi po uso ang kukunti ang anak. Kung makakakita ka ng Maranao family na 4 ang anak, that is very rare. Napakakonti na ng 4 sa kanila. To 15. And some other members of the family also stay with them. So there's another family that actually has about 21 members living in just one household. That made also their evacuation, their escaping from the Maa even more difficult dahil sa sobrang dami nila. So I think that is one of the characteristics, no, of the culture of the Maranaos. They stick together. They value family, close family ties, so they don't really separate from one another. They wanted to stay in just one household. So kaya sama-sama palagi sila. Ito rin po ang naging dahilan kung bakit nahirapan din silang bumangon dahil say for instance in evacuating, hindi po, ang iba sa kanila hindi tumira sa evacuation center because they find it really difficult to stay in the evacuation center. Mainit, kulang sa pagkain, madumi, walang masyadong, walang tubig, walang ventilation. So what they did is to transfer to stay with a relative. Most of the families nakitira po sa pamilya, family members, relatives, distant relative, no. Ang naging mahirap sa bawat pamilya nung nakitira sila ay dahil sa sobrang dami nila. Some members would even have, as I mentioned, 21 members in the family staying in just one relative. So imagine kung paano sila nagkakasya sa isang bahay na pinapakitirahan nila just so they can survive, no? And even when the local government started identifying the beneficiaries for the transitional shelter, medyo nahirapan din sila because as claimed by some respondents, ang pagpapalista ay meron pa ring palakasan system. So for you to be awarded with a shelter or a home, kailangan ay meron kang kakilala in the local government, probably the mayor and other officials in the LGU. Now, Khalida, the source of income of Khalida is the sari-sari store. And yung kanyang anak, yun na lang ang sumusuporta sa kanya. Yung kanyang mga pag-aaring building, wala na lahat. Si Nora and her family, she is also one of the family, her family actually belongs to the low income also. So dalawa lang, sa lahat ng families na na-cover ko, dalawa lang ang parang nabibilang sa low income family, and Nora is one of them. No, she is a government employee, pero hindi pa siya permanent. She works with the SWD. And what happened to them was that they also stayed with relatives, but eventually hindi kinaya yung pakikitira sa relatives and lumipat sa evacuation center. But then they experienced sickness, no, in the evacuation centers dahil walang malinis na tubig. So they had diarrhea, and some of them were claiming that yung mga food packages or food packs given to them were sometimes yung expired na. Some of them were claiming, no. Some of the families, or most of the families stated that the role of the security forces in keeping the peace in Marawi City is very crucial. They were thankful to the security forces, both the AFP and the PNP, because of the help that they received, no? Except for one family na sinisisi ang security forces, the AFP particularly, and kasama rin ang PNP, dahil sinasabi nila na kung hindi pumasok ang security forces in their area, siguro hindi magiging ganun kagrabe yung naging destruction, because it was only when the bombs, the cannons were started to be released that the destruction was even more evident. So isa sa mga pamilya, sa 10 pamilyang ito, sinasabi na they are somehow blaming the government, no, the national government in particular, kung bakit nag-decide na bombahin na agad ang lugar nila at hindi mo na dinaan sa diplomacy or other peace negotiations, because if the national government tried to do this, parang iniisip nila na sana hindi nila na-experience yung ganitong klaseng pamumuhay kung saan galing sa taas ay bigla silang naghirap. And they're claiming also that the support of the government is not enough for them to be able to really move forward. Though other international organizations are also providing, pero yung livelihood packages parang hindi sapat according to them para sila ay bumangon galing po sa pagkalugno. NAJMA is a PWD. Ito ay ang case ni NAJMA is should I say kakaiba because she's a victim of kidnapping prior to Marawi siege. isa siyang student ng MSU. A fourth year, I think graduating siya, no? Graduating na si Najma when a suitor invited her over a meal, and sumama naman siya without realizing that the man was planning actually to kidnap her. So, nung na-realize niya na iba yung direction ng pinupuntahan nila, she actually jumped off from the car and she hit her head, no? So she was brought to the hospital. She was in the ICU, and kailangang operahan, major operation yung kanyang ulo. And it incurred about more than $500,000 bill sa hospital prior to the siege. So that's the reason why she became PWD. But what happened was that yung lalaking nagkidnap sa kanya offered to pay all the bills, hospital bills, pero yung kondisyon ay magpapakasal siya doon sa lalaking yon. So, si Najma, napilitan na lang na magpakasal doon sa nagkidnap sa kanya dahil yung kanyang pamilya ay kinumbinsi siya na pakasalan na lang yung lalaking nagkidnap sa kanya to avoid rido. You know, in most of the clans or clan wars, no, yung mga rido na to, isa ang family ni Najma sa parang umiiwas na magkaroon ng clan war. So, the parents of Najma convinced her na para hindi na magkaroon ng away pamilya, yung pamilya nila at yung pamilya ng lalaki, ay pumayag na lang siyang magpakasal. In exchange of the payment for the hospital bills plus additional, I think about 400,000 as a dowry. Kasi sa kanilang pamilya, uso pa rin po sa Maranao family yung pagbibigay ng dowry. So pumayag siya, no, na magpakasal doon sa lalaking nagkidnap sa kanya. When the Marawi siege happened, ilang months pa lang siyang nakaka-recover from the operation. And upon hearing the gunfire, she had to bring with her yung kanyang anak, karga-karga niya, pati na yung kanyang pamangkin na karga-karga niya din. And then she ran about a kilometer, no, para makaiwas doon sa mga sunog na nangyayari doon sa neighborhood niya. So, after that, nagkaroon ulit siya ng sakit dahil doon sa nangyari sa kanya. She was brought to the hospital. This time, doon na siya sa Iligan. So, these are the experiences that she had before, during the siege. Now, the good thing was that the hospital in Iligan, parang meron silang kaibigan na tumulong sa kanila to help them with the bill. Eventually, hindi rin nag-work yung marriage ni Najma with the husband, no, because of domestic violence. So, naghiwalay din sila. So right now, Najma is also in the transitional shelter, living with the parents. The parents are also senior citizens na, so wala nang kakayahang magtrabaho. So Najma, being a PWD, but at the same time, she had to work and to provide for the family. Umaasa lang siya sa support ng mga NGOs, no? And of course, yung kukunting sahod na nare-receive niya from the non-government organization kung saan siya volunteer. The story of Mariam. Si Mariam, ang asawa niya ay isang official sa kanilang barangay. The chairman in their barangay. So she is also living an affluent life, magandang bahay, magarang sasakyan. And the lifestyle of Mariam were, over the top. They would travel, they would shop to Iligan, to Cagayan de Oro, So ganun yung lifestyle nila bago yung siege. So when the armed conflict happened, napilitan silang umalis at naiwan yung kanilang mga bahay, walang pera. And sabi nga ni Mariam, that was the very first time they experienced wearing second-hand clothes, ukay-ukay, because they used to wear branded clothes. But after the Marawi siege, yung kukunting pera na natira na binigay ng DSWD, ginamit niya to start a small business of dried fish. So yan na lang po ang naging negosyo niya ngayon. And I remember when I was interviewing her and the kids, no, she's still crying because parang hindi pa rin niya matanggap yung nangyari sa kanilang pamumuhay. When they returned to their homes, wala na, natupok na. Yung bagong kotseng bili nila, wala na rin. Nasunog na rin. So basically, wala na silang binalikan. So they have to start from zero and umaasa lang sa support ng gobyerno and relatives. The story of Neha and her family. Neha owns a big grocery store, and on the day of the siege, bagong marketing lang siya sa Iligan. Neha is the only respondent na merong bank account. Kasi po ang mga Maranaos, they do not do banking. Hindi sila nagbabangko. They felt that the money or the interest that their money would be earning in the bank is very, very small. So they would rather spend their money in businesses. So of all the 10 families covered, it was only Neha who has a bank account, no? But on that particular day, she withdrew all her money dahil malapit ng mag-Ramadan. I think few days na lang magra-Ramadan na. So ang ginawa ng mga businessmen in the CBD doon sa MAA ay nag-marketing. They went to Iligan, Cagayan de Oro, Cebu para mag-marketing at ititinda nila dahil nga sa Ramadan. So, I remember Neha was telling me that she withdrew about 400,000 of her money, and she just, I think, had 5,000 in the bank. Yun na lang ang itinira niyang pera. Yung 400,000, inubos niyang binili ng mga bigas. So, yung isang truck ng bigas, bagong deliver, when the gunfire started. So yung nag-deliver na truck, umalis na, naiwan yung truck kasama yung mga bigas na pinamili niya. And then after a few days, they had to evacuate, leaving behind everything. All the rice, the sacks of rice is still in the truck, and all the properties left behind, pati na ang kanilang mga alahas. Many of the respondents were saying that part of their investment is into jewelries. Mahilig sila sa mga alahas. But when they left their houses, hindi sila nagdala ng mga alahas nila. Mahilig din po silang mag-store ng kanilang mga cash and jewelries in their houses. Ang iba ay inililibing sa lupa. That's their practice, no? Nililibing sa lupa, yun ang kanilang taguan. So they don't really store it in the bank or somewhere else, but just inside their homes. That's their practice. So that's why when they left, pagbalik nila, wala na rin lahat, natupok na rin lahat, no? And according to Neha, few days before the siege happened, meron na siyang nakikitang mga unfamiliar faces roaming around the area. And there was one time na may bumili sa kanyang lalaki. And only to realize na yung lalaki pa lang yun was one of the Maoti brothers. And yung kanya palang, yung one of the Maoti brothers ay naging classmate niya. I think in high school, no. And sabi niya hindi siya makapaniwala that one of the Maoti brothers was part of the armed conflict in Marawi. Dahil sinasabi niya naging mabait naman yung I think it was Omar Khayyam na naging kaklase niya, no. So this is also the instance where Neha experienced having to stay in a relative pero hindi rin niya nakayanan, and also yung the usual na how do we say that, lifestyle ay nagbago because of this armed conflict. So right now, what's the livelihood of Neha? She's selling clothes. No, yung konting nakuha niya din from the DSWD, she would buy some clothes to be sold inside the transitional shelter. The usual changes that happen in their lifestyle, sabi nila, dati silang nakahiga sa kama, no, nandoon na lang sila sa banig. Yung kanyang anak, dahil nagiging sakitin, formerly, meron silang private physician, but now, umaasa lang sila sa clinic ng transitional shelter, and also umaasa sa medical missions and all the medicines being provided in the clinic. They don't have the means to go to private physician that they used to do prior to the siege. Sultana. Si Sultana, the name Sultana is because she is from a sultanate family. So mayaman din ang pinanggalingan niyang pamilya. This is the story where the husband of Sultana died in the siege. Yung husband ni Sultana prior to the siege was confined in the hospital for some condition. And nakakalabas pa lang po sila sa hospital with the provision, with the condition of, sabi ng doktor, that the husband has to be provided with oxygen. So iniuwi niya sa bahay nila yung kanyang asawa. And then, few days after, pumutok yung war sa Marawi. They wanted to evacuate, however, hindi nila maiwan yung kanyang asawa. So ang ginawa nila, some other members of the family had to leave. Kasama si Sultana sa umalis muna, thinking na they can provide an ambulance. No? They were looking for an ambulance kung saan pwedeng isakay yung kanyang asawa. It just so happened that when they were able to get one, hindi na sila maaring pumasok sa area because it was already barricaded by the security forces. They were not allowed to go inside, and they could not also provide oxygen dahil naubusan na ng oxygen yung kanyang asawa, and nag-brown out na kasi sa lugar. So eventually, nung nakapasok sila sa area, the husband already died. They also do not have any means of giving a proper burial to the husband. So ang ginawa nila, inilibing na lang niya yung kanyang asawa sa mismong loob ng bahay nila. And then they left. When eventually the security forces allowed them to go back to their homes, when Marawi was liberated, nakita nila na nahukay pa yung pinaglibingan nila ng kanyang asawa. They were thinking that probably the ISIS or members of the security forces hinukay yung libingan thinking na ang nakalagay doon ay mga jewelries o mga alahas nila. So kaya parang hindi rin nabigyan ng magandang libing yung kanyang asawa. So kung meron man pong isa sa mga may casualty sa mga pamilyang ito, it was Sultana. Farhana and her family, siya ay may pinakamaraming anak. Ang dami niyang anak, no? I think 12, if I can recall correctly, the story of Farhana. They own trucking businesses, and the husband is into gold businesses. All gone when the Marawi siege happened. So now they're just starting to engage again into small business. Again, nag-venture ulit sila sa gold mining and gold businesses with the help of the in-laws. So Farhana is one of the families na may napakadaming anak. Case number 10, the story of Samaira and her family. Isa din ito sa maraming anak din, maraming members ng family. What happened here, when they started to evacuate, they don't have any vehicle. So the husband just made use of a motorcycle. So pabalik-balik niyang kinuha yung members of the family. But the last time that he went back to their homes, nakasalubong niya yung mga ISIS, no? And the members of the ISIS wanted him to stay, and ibibigay niya yung kanyang motor vehicle. So I remember the husband of Samaira saying that he just gave the motor vehicle to the ISIS para lang siya makatakas. So these are the different stories of families in Marawi during the siege. And upon assessing all their stories, experiences, I have identified the different factors that help them, no, in their resiliency. Though some of them would say that they have not yet recovered fully from their experiences, but they were able to move forward because of the following factors. The social networks and family ties. Most of them went to relatives. For some time, nakitira sila dahil nahirapan sila sa evacuation center. So family and friends and relatives from other places would send help, no? That actually made them somehow recover from the atrocities. And then another factor is access to credit loan, to credit or loan. Nag-utang, no? Ang access to loans, it may be an institutional loan or again personal loan from friends and families. Ito din yung nakatulong sa kanila para unti-unti silang makabangon. Yung mga kaibigan na nagpahiram sa kanila. But these loans were paid off little by little with the money provided by the local and national government and some other non-government organizations. And employment of family members. Before the siege, they used to stick together. And because maganda naman yung pamumuhay nila, because they were into business, the Maranaos are merchants by nature. Sila ay mga negosyante. So if they have money, they would rather spend it on businesses rather than keeping it in the bank. So kaya hindi po sila mahiling magbangko. They don't do banking dahil mas gusto nilang mag-earn ng interest yung pera nila through the business. So before they were into businesses, but because nga nangyari yung Marawi siege, napilitan yung members ng pamilyang mangibang bayan. Some would even go to Metro Manila, to Cagayan de Oro, some to Iligan, and other nearby cities and municipalities just to seek employment. So naghanap ng trabaho, nagpapadala ng pera sa pamilya para makatulong. Institutional support and interventions. Ito yung mga international and local NGOs that would give interventions. Some would even give livelihood packages. And then engaging into small-scale livelihood, just like what happened to some other families, engaging into sari-sari store, dried fish, buying and selling of some clothes, ukay-ukay, and so on and so forth. And most of them identified religious faith, yung kanilang paniniwala sa kanilang Allah that helped them have a positive outlook and move forward. No? And the last one is acceptance. So sabi nila, para makabangon sila, kailangan nilang tanggapin yung nangyari sa kanila. So these are the factors that actually help them become resilient. So that's the resiliency paradigm that I was able to develop, considering the responses that I got. And I was able also to propose a multi-stakeholder and mutual assistance paradigm. This is a framework for resiliency, taking into consideration the different leadership, no, top leadership, middle range, and grassroots leadership. Ito kasing framework na to, I was thinking of giving support to areas na naka-experience ng armed conflict. Yung immediate support that they can get from the nearby cities and municipalities, just like what happened in Marawi. When they left Marawi, ang unang-unang napuntahan nila ay yung karatig lugar nila, which is the Banlui and Iligan. So yun ang nagkup-kup sa kanila for the time being. But some of the respondents claimed that they heard some officials from Iligan City saying na kapag maulit-ulit ang Marawi siege, isasara nila ang Iligan City at hindi sila magpapasok ng sino naman na manggagaling sa Marawi. And that is so sad to hear that these nearby cities are considering closing their borders to displace individuals and families from an armed conflict area dahil ayaw nilang madamay doon sa gulo. So, one of the things that would help them, no, these displaced families, to become resilient and recover is for these people belonging to the different level of management or leadership. So that's why I propose a multi-stakeholder and mutual assistance paradigm. So kung yung mga karatig na lugar nila, yun na muna ang immediate na tutulong sa kanila before the national government can actually give their assistance. These are the findings. I think I will just be running through these findings. Parang I'm done with my 1 hour time. So ito po yung mga findings. Age range is from 26 years old to 65. Marital status, out of the 10 families or respondents, 7 are married, 1 is separated, 2 are widow. On sex, 9 were female, 1 male. Slum, is the religion of all the respondents. Wala pong naging respondents na belonging to a different religion. The educational attainment, five of the respondents are in college level, 4 are college graduate, and 1 is high school graduate. On barangays, 3 of the respondents from the Guduban, 2 from Kapantaran, 2 from West Marinaot, 1 from Tuca Marinaot, and 1 from Dansalan. Sa economic status, 6 are from high-income families. 2 came from average income family and 2 from low-income families. As I mentioned a while ago, karamihan kasi sa kanila ay maganda ang pamumuhay dahil they were into businesses. Number of family members, the smallest is 4, biggest is 21. Experiences of the families before, during, and after the Marawi siege. So ito yung mga pagbabago sa kanilang profession, family life, education, sociocultural, and health. No? So before the armed conflict, 9 were engaged in business, 1 is employed. During the conflict, 1 is employed, 9 are without livelihood. After the conflict, 7 are into businesses, 2 are employed, and 1 has no livelihood. Family life before the siege, they have their own house. The family members are sticking together. Family is complete or intact. 8 respondents also indicated that they have a happy, comfortable life. During the siege, 8 of the respondents live with a relative. So kasi nga nahirapan sila sa evacuation center, so they would rather stay with a relative. So they relied on their support. They relied on the relative for the support. And 7 indicated that family is still complete and together. No? Another 7 disclosed that they have incurred debts. Yeah. Halos naman sila ay nagkaroon ng utang. As in fact, ang mga tulong na nakukuha nila ay binabayad lang po nila sa kanilang utang. Kung ano man yung matitira, yun yung ginamit nila to start a very small business. So dati, they can actually buy whatever they want, but after the siege, naging matipid sila dahil kulang yung pumapasok na income. 6 became solo income earner, and 5 revealed the family members have been separated, while another 5 said the family members are still sticking together, and 5 also revealed sharing family after the siege. Because some other members, because nga sa sobrang busy nila sa kanilang pamumuhay, wala silang pagkakataong kumain ng sabay-sabay as a family. But one of the good things that happened to their family after the armed conflict is that they had a chance to eat meal together with the members of the family. On education, 6 respondents stated that their children are enrolled in private schools. So ang naging pagbabago dito, yung iba tumigil sa pag-aaral during the 5 months, no? And it lasted for 1 to 2 years na yung mga bata natigil sa pag-aaral. And when they returned, hindi na sila sa private school. Doon na sila sa school in the transitional shelter or in the public school in the area. On sociocultural, so 10 or all of the respondents said that they really value close family ties. And I think one of the characteristics of the Maranao families, which I noted, is that it's the mother who is the head of the family. It's not the father. So sinasabi nila that it's though the father is the one that also provides for the family, but the head of the family is the mother that actually keep the family together. So yun ang parang kakaiba sa Maranao families. They use cash in their purchases. So hindi pa sa kanila uso yung mga credit cards. And as I mentioned, they do not do banking. So out of the 10 families I've interviewed, isa lang po ang may bank account. Although most of them are businessmen, businesswomen, hindi po sila nagbabangko. They keep their jewelries, they keep their cash inside their homes. So kaya nung nangyari po yung gera, umalis sila, naiwan ng lahat ng mga ari-arian nila sa kanilang bahay. So when they returned, wala na silang binalikan. Lahat ay nasunog. During the siege, the socio-cultural characteristics observed are, well, they help each other, they uplift each other. Ganyan daw po ang isa sa mga characteristic ng Maranao. No? They help each other. Family sticking together and strong family support. Well, after the siege, wala pa rin pagbabago, hindi pa rin sila nagbabangko. I think the reason for this is that wala naman talaga silang ipapasok sa bangko because walang masyadong livelihood, no, income ang mga tao sa transitional shelter. On health, well, bago po nangyari yung siege, dahil may mga negosyo sila, they can actually seek medical attention from private hospitals. They even have their private doctors. And lahat ng mga pakiramdam, nararamdaman nila sa mga sarili nila, madaling mabigyan ng attention. But during the siege, ang iba sa kanila ay nagkaroon ng mga malalang sakit, pero hindi po nabigyan ng attention because walang paraan para makapagpagamot sila. After the siege in the transitional shelter, they were just relying on, as mentioned, so clinic, pero wala namang doktor palagi. I think in a week, isang beses lang pumupunta yung doktor or sometimes wala pa. And some of them would even claim na yung mga gamot na naibibigay minsan expired pa. And from time to time, merong medical mission. So doon na lang sila umaasa. Yung mga tulong na nakuha nila from the local government, the usual, food packages, relief, cash assistance, just like the 73,000 given by the DSWD, potable water provided, and medicines. Sa national government, housing, yung transitional shelter provided, yung family and livelihood packages, and still food pack. From the security forces, the police and military helped them in achieving peace in Marawi. Another 8 indicated that protection, safety, and security was provided by them, and 6 respondents stated that police and military also provided relief packages. I remember sa security forces, some families identified psychosocial intervention provided by the hijab troopers, yung tinatawag nilang hijab troopers, parang nagbibigay ng mga psychosocial intervention, lalo na sa mga bata who experience some trauma. Non-governmental organization yan. Andyan yung Red Cross that provides ration, daily water ration in the transitional shelter kasi wala pong source of water sa Gunsungan village. So ang ginagawa ng Red Cross is nagbibigay ng tubig. Every day po yan, mga trucks of delivery ng tubig po. Pinifill yung kanilang mga water tanks. And may mga non-government organizations that help, like the UNICEF, the World Food, and other international organizations. Some would even say politicians would come, no, to give them cash and food packs. Problems encountered, they wanted to go back. When the Marawi was liberated, they wanted to go back to their lands. Kahit wala na silang babalikang bahay, gusto nilang i-rebuild yung mga bahay nila na nasira. But the government would not allow them to return. in the most affected areas. Some reasons, according to the task force, Task Force Bangon Marawi, they had to clear the area first kasi meron pang mga explosives na naiwan, so kaya hindi pa nila maaring pabalikin yung mga pamilya to begin rebuilding their houses. And this is one of the problems identified by the respondents. Sinasabi nila na gusto na nilang bumalik para maka-start sila ng bagong buhay, pero the government would not allow them to enter. And hanggang sa mga oras na conduct ako ng research, wala pa pong binabalik na tubig at kuryente sa lugar. And according to the Task Force Bangon Marawi, they are also making sure na yung mga requirements sa lupa, titling and other things that they needed to polish with the Registry of Deeds ay magawa muna before they allow the families to return. Lack of sustainable livelihood is also another problem. Unfulfilled promises of the government. Yan, marami daw pinangako yung gobyerno na hindi naman naibigay. And then discrimination. So the fact that they are Maranaos, nadi-discriminate po sila. When they go to other places, they were also identified as terrorists. So this is my framework, which I already discussed a while ago. Conclusions, yan. So, nadaanan ko na lang po. Probably if you have questions later on, you can just ask me. So this is the Sagunsungan Village Transitional Shelter. Ito yung mga interviews ko with ASIC Felix Castro, the TFBM Field Manager, and Colonel Tony Sugarol, the Deputy Manager. These are some of the courtesy calls that we made with Brigadier General Bagnos Gaerlan, Acting Commander of the 1st Infantry Division, Philippine Army, and with Colonel Jose Maria Cuerpo, the Brigade Commander of the Campo Ranao in Marawi City. And this is now the Marawi City. So slowly engaging into business again. So bumabangon na po sila. And I read in the news that 3 of the mosques in Marawi City are now being rehabilitated. Ito yung security team provided by Campo Ranao when we visited the most affected areas. Kasi hindi pa po pwedeng pumasok sa most affected area. So for you to be able to enter the ground zero, you needed to secure an entry permit from the Task Force Bangon Marawi and from the Campo Ranao. And pagpapasok ka, kailangan meron ka pa rin security. Kasi medyo delikado pa rin ang lugar. As I mentioned, yung mga natirang mga explosives na hindi pa nakukuha can also pose risk to the people entering the area. So I think I'm done with my presentation. I welcome questions from the floor. And for those who posted on Facebook and Zoom, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oropesa. Are there any questions from our audience? You may ask them now, or you may type in the chat box. Any questions, please? Okay, I have a question. Ma'am, I was just wondering, how were you able to find and select your study participants, and how did you manage to let them agree to be interviewed?
Before I went to Marawi, I coordinated with the Task Force Bangon Marawi, and they facilitated with the Sagunsungan Transitional Shelter. So in the transitional shelter, there is also a village leader or a village manager. So they asked me the profile of the respondents that I needed. So they already pre-identified the respondent. So when I went there, they just led me to the houses of those pre-identified respondents, families.
I see. Those were gripping stories indeed coming from the study participants. Are there further questions from our audience?
Actually, mahaba siya, sir. Yung chronicles ng mga stories, sobrang haba niya. So I just had to cut them short because you gave me just an hour to present. So if I will be able to, present this in full, I think it would take about 3 hours. Medyo mahaba siya.
Yes,
So,
I would understand. I would understand.
Kailangan
stories would be long.
Yes.
Okay. There are. Okay, there is a question.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
A while ago you presented the factors of the resiliency. So if you would give some weight to those factors, ano po yung may pinakamalaking factor contributing to the resiliency of the Marawi residents?
If I have to identify the biggest factor?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I getting your question correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. It's the help of the family members. That's the immediate help that they got when they started evacuating from the area, from the most affected area. The first thing that came to mind is to go to relatives where they can seek refuge and to stay there. So, bale, yung mga relatives, friends, family in areas na malayo po sa Marawi, doon sila nagpunta. It was a challenge for them kasi walang transportation. So nahirapan silang makarating. So most of them would walk from Marawi to a neighboring city or municipality just so they can reach a safe place. So yun po muna yung kumukop sa kanila for the first few months. Nagpakain sa kanila, nagbigay ng tirahan. And after staying with relatives or friends, slowly nag-establish na yung local and national government ng mga lugar kung saan magtatayo ng transitional shelter. And they also identified the recipients. Pero yun nga, this is still marred by some issues like palakasan system and other issues kung sino ang bibigyan ng shelter.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions, please? Well, it seems that we do not have further questions and comments as of now. So we would like to thank Dr. Oropesa for gracing the launching of the monthly webinar of the Bicol University Center for Policy Studies and Development. And we would like to present her with a certificate of commendation. May I ask the technical team to flash it on screen. So it reads, Certificate of Commendation is awarded to Gina M. Oropesa in recognition of her invaluable service and expertise as resource person during the CPSD Webinar Series 2021, Resiliency Experience of Selected Families in Marawi City in the Context of Peace Building, held on July 9, 2021 via video conferencing, given this 9th day of July 2021 at Bicol University, Legazpi. assigned Ronel R. Dionede Sr., Director, Research and Development Management Division and concurrent Director of the Center for Policy Studies and Development, Bicol University. Once again, thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Oropesa,
so much.
for being with us. And we also would like to thank our participants, our audience. We would like to remind the participants that please evaluate, accomplish the evaluation form. The link is there in the chat box. Your feedback matters to us, and you will get a certificate of participation once you accomplish the evaluation form. Next month we will have another topic. Just watch out for it. We will just post the topic in the BU website, in the BU FB page, and in the BU Extension Management Division FB page. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And be safe, everyone.